So, dinachles, digemermat. Welcome back to aliīs vōcibus, where we explore voices that are rarely heard and often disregarded. Today, I invite you to the northwestern edge of Europe. Before Britain was English, before it was Anglo-Saxon, before it was Germanic, the island of Britain had other voices. Not accents, not dialects, languages. Languages that once connected Britain to the rest of Celtic Europe, from Gaul to Iberia, from the Alps to the Atlantic. Today, only 3 of the older British voices remain: Welsh, Cornish, Breton. They are often treated as regional curiosities or as survivors clinging to the edge of history, but they are something else. They are the last living voices of ancient Britain. What ancient Britain means. When I say ancient Britain, I don't mean stone circles or druids. I mean Britain before Germanic languages arrived, before Old English spread across the island, before English became the default voice of power. At that time, most of Britain spoke languages belonging to the Brittonic or Brythonic branch of Celtic. These languages were once part of a much larger chain, the Celtic chain. Once, Celtic languages stretched across Europe like a chain, from Anatolia to today's Turkey, where Galatian was spoken, through the Balkans and the Alps, across Gaul into Britain, and finally to Ireland. Not one language, but a branch of related Indo-European ones, linked by sound, structure, and shared history. Over time, that chain broke. On the continent, Celtic languages disappeared almost entirely. In Britain, they retreated westward. Only a few voices can still be heard. Brittonic Celtic, a family unit, not a relic. The Brittonic languages were once spoken across most of what is now England, Wales, and southern Scotland. They included languages we no longer hear: Cumbrian, spoken in the north; Pictish, spoken beyond Scotland's Firth of Forth; and related Celtic languages were spoken across the Channel and in northwestern Iberia. What survive are 3 closely related sisters: Welsh, Cornish, Breton. Not relics, but living languages shaped by very different histories. Welsh, continuity, not revival. Welsh is the strongest of the 3. It's an official language of Wales, alongside English. It is also a regional language in Argentina. It was never brought back because it never fully disappeared. Despite conquest, legal suppression, and marginalization, Welsh remained a community language, and it experienced periods of renewed institutional support. It developed its own literary tradition, its own standard forms, and today its own institutions. One of these is the Eisteddfod, an annual festival with medieval roots celebrating Welsh culture, language, and identity. Welsh shows us something important. Survival doesn't always mean resistance. Sometimes it means continuity under pressure. Welsh isn't a fossil. It's a modern language with ancient roots. It's the language of a country, a proud country. Welsh, which calls itself Cymraeg, uses a writing system that can seem peculiar, even off-putting to outsiders. Words can begin with double D, double F, or double L, and W often stands for a vowel. But the system is far more consistent and easier to learn than English spelling. And the sound, judge for yourself.
Ond mae'r daith yn cychwyn nôl yn 1942, yna pryd ces i'n ngeni, yn Llangefni, Sir Fôn. Ynys fechan ydy Sir Fôn, oddi ar arfordir Gogledd Cymru.
Cornish, a voice recovered. Cornish, which calls itself Germanic, tells a very different story. By the late 18th century, Cornish had ceased to be spoken as a community language. For a long time it was described as dead, but languages don't only live in mouths. They also live in texts, memory, and identity. Cornish was reconstructed from historical sources, plays, poems, and word lists. It's now officially recognized in Cornwall, today a ceremonial county of England. What we hear today is not medieval Cornish, but revived Cornish, a modern language consciously rebuilt. That doesn't make it less real. It makes it one of the most remarkable acts of linguistic recovery in Europe. There are now native Cornish speakers, people who were brought up speaking both Cornish and English, and the language is being taught in schools. Listen to someone speaking Cornish naturally.
Gorthiwr da, Elizabeth o fi, ha trigys of in Cerno. Ha Cernoes of, a mi gaws an ieth Cernuic, Cernuagores of. Atho mi a ddalathus dysgu an ieth Cernuic ha mi nepus a dro the seith blodd del dibaf.
Breton, Britain's language in France. Breton is often misunderstood. Many people assume that it's a remnant of Gaulish, the original Celtic language of much of France. But it's not. Breton is a Brittonic language that crossed the sea. It arrived in Armorica with migrants from Britain in the early Middle Ages. In other words, Breton, which calls itself Brythonic, is a voice of Britain spoken in France. Its closest relative is Cornish. For centuries, Breton was a majority language in Western Brittany, but unlike Welsh, it faced aggressive state suppression. Today, Breton survives, but precariously. Like all regional languages of France, it has no official status, at best, and not as cultural heritage. It reminds us that political borders do not protect languages. They often erase them. Let's enjoy the sound of Breton voices while we can.
Brythonic nick im Yisvam, a Gallegio a zo me Yisvam, Shiwas. Deskem mus Brythonic de glaso, tampedam, de larde pawan tribla varnugen. Deskem mus maunan gan larju.
The last voices, Welsh, Cornish and Breton, are not simply Celtic languages. They are the last living voices of ancient Britain. They tell us what Britain sounded like before English. They carry systems and rhythms all their own and worldviews that predate the modern nation state. They aren't echoes. They are voices still speaking. Cymraeg, Garneweg, a Llydaweg, Ywrioedd, Brythonic, a Oroesod. Cymreg, Garneweg, a Brythonic, Ywanietho, Brythonic, a Wosesbew. A Chymreg, a Chanefyrig, ac a Brythonic, yw a Jesu Breseg, a Siomasbew. What's next? In the next episode, we'll follow a different branch of Celtic: Irish, Scottish Gaelic, and Manx, the last Gaelic voices of the western end of Europe. Different histories, different survival stories, but part of the same broken chain. Because languages don't just disappear. They are silenced or remembered, and sometimes they speak back. Chwil, tu genes, ginafo,